Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion.
Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I am doing Canadian hair metal before hair metal existed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some Canadian bands and highlight a song from this band that I think fits in really well with what became the hair metal scene. And when I talk about hair metal, of course, it wasn't called that term or given that term at the time, but basically talking about those hard rock, heavy metal bands that came out around 83 to about 92. It was a really popular time for that type of music. And so I'm going to be talking about bands that had songs that sound very much like that, but actually were released prior to 1983 and were Canadian bands. And this episode is actually slightly inspired by a History in 5 Songs episode that Martin Popoff did called Was Hair Metal Born in Canada? It was a really good episode. I think it was like 184. He did it quite a while ago, but he makes the point that there were a lot of Canadian bands that came out prior to hair metal really kicking off that sound like they could perfectly have fitted in to that scene and maybe were inspirations or already had that sound down before it became very popular. Now, of course, there are a number of bands from America as well that were doing this type of sound prior to 1983. Van Halen being one of the best examples, also Kiss, Aerosmith, and even Night Ranger, who, sort of in the early 80s came out, and really they're a really good example of a band that had that sound really before it became so big and popular in the sort of mid 80s. But I'm just going to focus on the Canadian bands because it really is interesting to see how many of these Canadian bands really had that sound down. So if you like that sort of hair metal type sound and you haven't checked out these bands or these songs, I suggest you check them out because I think you might like them. I must admit, for me, I often, when I was looking for music, wouldn't really go much before 1980 sort of three, sort of even 83 at times. I was like, oh, that's a bit old, that type of music. I didn't start getting into hard rock or heavy metal until around 86, 87. And, for me, it seemed like, oh, yes, that hair metal sound was sort of, not that I was thinking of it that way, but those sort of bands I like, they all started to come out around 83, 84, 85. And so I didn't really pay a lot of attention to music prior to 1983, but there's actually a lot of good music. And I'm just really, for some of these bands or these songs, I'm only really discovering them quite recently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a band and an album and a song from that album that I think really fits in well with what was to become the hair metal sort of sound. So, first band I'm going to talk about, April Wine, from the album Harder, Faster. And the song I'm going to highlight is I Like to Rock. Really fantastic song. Here's the band at the back. And this is from 1979. And, there's a few other songs as well, because April Wine put out quite a few albums prior to 1983. And, there's other songs as well. And with a number of these bands, but I'm just going to highlight one song, but there's possibly more than one song that would definitely fit that category of being, the proto-hair metal song. All right, next up, and some of these bands are more well-known than others. This is a fairly well-known band. This is Triumph. So from the album Never Surrender, which came out in 1982, the song I'm going to talk about is A World of Fantasy. Really love that song. And I missed Triumph a little bit back in the day. Only discovered them a little bit later on. And World of Fantasy, I think, is a great song. Really good song. Next one, a solo artist that I have talked about a little bit on my channel. He is definitely an artist who I think was a big inspiration for John Bon Jovi, for one thing. And when you think about the success that John Bon Jovi had, he then really got the hair metal scene to become really, really big and popular, didn't he? So, but he was influenced, I think, and this person was a friend of his who he worked with in the studio before he became the big music star that he became, Aldo Nova. And this was a hit album as well. So this is his debut solo album. And the song I'm going to highlight is Fantasy. So that one I think was the first single. It was a bit of a hit, and this album also was very successful. But just that riff that kicks off that song, and again, one of those albums too, where there's a number of songs on that album that fit really nicely into the hair metal category. You could even look at Subject. Now, this one's 1983. Subject also very much, if you like early Bon Jovi, it's got a lot of early Bon Jovi influences on there. Now, also one thing too about this album, it has a song on it called Hey Operator. Now, Hey Operator is actually a song by Coney Hatch. And I don't actually have that album, but that came out in 1982. So Coney Hatch, another band that are worth checking out, 1982, and the song I'm going to highlight is Hey Operator, which is also on that Aldo Nova album Subject. All right, next one. This is female-fronted hard rock, and from a band that I really love. I think they were a fantastic band. This is their debut album. It's called Turn It Loud, and the band is called Headpins. And the song I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to highlight is Don't It Make You Feel. Really good song. I think there's a music video for that one as well, which is worth checking out. And they put out, I think there's 2 more albums after this, all really good albums, but this is 1982. And again, just would fit really nicely into that hair metal sound. Next one, more female fronted. This is female solo artist. Probably, I think you might be able to guess who I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about Lee Aaron. She actually came out with this album in 1982. I think originally this is the alternative cover, but and it was, I think, initially called the Lee Aaron Project, but it's still, this is 1982. The song I'm going to highlight is a song called Night Riders. Quite a heavy song, real sort of 80s metal type sound, but still commercial and melodic. And interestingly enough, too, this is written by a guy called Rick Santos, along with Lee Aaron as well. And I don't actually have a Santos album. The only one I've got, well, prior to 83, I've got Guitar Alley. This one came out in 84. But Santos is also another band that are worth checking out for their influence on hair metal prior to 1983. But this one's Guitar Alley from 1984. But yeah, Rick Santos, he has a songwriting credit for the Lee Aaron song Night Riders, and actually so does Rick Emmett as well from Triumph. He has songwriting credits on there. So sometimes with some of these bands, there's some crossover. So, and that would make sense, wouldn't it? But in fact, we're getting to another crossover situation here. Next one I'm going to talk about, Rabbit. Now, for whatever reason, this album doesn't have the title anywhere on it, but it's actually called Rough and Ready. I think you can see it on the label of the record. Rough and Ready from 1981. It's unbelievable. It's 1981. And there's, again, more than one song I could choose. But I decided in the end, I was going to go with Tell Me What to Do. Yeah, Tell Me What to Do. Really good song. Really love that one. But I almost thought Pushing On also, or Anyway, Anytime would have been good. But lots of good songs on this one, actually. Really like this album. Now, the crossover or the connection with Rabbit is it features on guitar John Albani, who goes on to become the guitar player for Lee Aaron. Right, next one. Now, this is it's got a lot of female-fronted, actually. It's quite interesting as well, isn't it? The number of female-fronted hard rock, which hair metal influence type bands. Toronto, and this is Get It On Credit. Now, the song I'm going to highlight here, and again, it was more than one, but I decided to go with You Love to Love. Really good song. Yeah, so female-fronted, You Love to Love. Sounds very much like Bryan Adams, which is interesting because Jim Vallance does have a songwriting credit on here. He has a songwriting credit for a really good song called Don't Walk Away. It's another one of my favorites from this album. And of course, Jim Vallance wrote a lot with Bryan Adams, but he does not have a songwriting credit on You Love to Love. It sounds very much like Bryan Adams. And again, you'd probably say Bryan Adams. I mean, you could argue he was he had a sort of that hair metal sound down a little bit as well. If you think about some of his early albums, definitely very much a hard rock type sound. Next one. Now this is an interesting album because this album came out in 1982, and then one of the songs from the album got played on radio many years later, and so the album got re-released. And then this band ended up forming the band Alias, but initially this band was Sheriff, and this is from 1982. So yeah, so Fred Kersey on vocals, great vocalist. Like I said, I think a number of the guys from here go on to form the band Alias, who also had a hit with one of their songs as well. But it's not the it was sort of a ballad type song they had the hit with. That's not the song I'm going to choose. There are again a number of songs on here that I really like. It's quite a heavy. It's actually quite a rocking album. And check out "Keep Me Coming." That's really pretty heavy song. So, but yeah, also I really like "California." You Remind Me. This is a heavier album than I was expecting it to be, and especially even think about Alias, which have some good, good hard rock songs on them. But yeah, check out "Keep Me Running." Good song. And yeah, you could just imagine that on a hair metal album in the mid '80s. Another surprise. Now, this band I only recently, or fairly recently, in the last sort of maybe couple of years, I guess, but discovered, and it's a band called The Hunt, and from the album The Thrill of the Kill. Now, this is their third and final album. So they've done some albums prior to this, which I'm not that familiar with, but I really like this one. And again, number of tracks I could choose for, but I'm going to go with the opening track, "Show the World." Really good song. And again, for me, if you had said this came out in 1986 from a hair metal band, I would totally have believed you. So yeah, check this out. This is not that well known, but The Hunt, Thrill of the Kill, and check out the song "Show the World." And yeah, all these songs I have put on a playlist, and you can see a link in the description for that playlist. All right, next one, an album and band I've shown before on my channel. This is Reckless, and it's another female fronted. This is just the way it turned out. It's not intentional. Female fronted. They have the worst album cover, even the back cover. It's a shocker. But this is actually 1981, I think, when this comes out. And the song I'm going to choose is "Victim of Time." Really love that song. Now they do end up doing a second. This is the band Reckless. They do end up doing a second album, but they have a different vocalist. So they switch from the female vocalist to a male vocalist. There he is there. And this is their 84 album, Heart of Steel. They look a lot more hair metal here. And that's the thing too, with a lot of these bands, although they had the hair metal sound, they didn't necessarily have the image. They just had the sound. But yeah, Reckless and Victim of Time. And yeah, so I mean, that's actually, one more actually. This is a cassette. And of course, I've got to show Loverboy. So Loverboy, I mean, Turn Me Loose. That's the song I'm going to go for. That is, very much what you could imagine as a hair metal song, really. But this is 1981, and it was a big hit as well, I know. But yeah, and yeah, cassette. Somehow this made it to New Zealand, Canadian cassette, CBS. Yeah, there's the little Loverboy on the spine there. Yeah, and I mean the kid is hot tonight as well. And they've got an album after this which came out in '82, which is again pre-hair metal, which is another hit. Also again would fit into this category of hair metal before hair metal really existed. And yeah, so that's the ones I've got to show. But I did also want to talk about three other bands and songs that I actually don't have, and I really need to work on getting these bands and these albums in my collection. So the first one is a band called Fist, and sometimes they're known as Myofist. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I do have a Fist album, but I just don't have this one. And it's the album when it was released as Fist, it was called Fleet Street. It was released as Myofist. It was known as Thunder and Rock, and Thunder and Rock is a song that I have selected. Yeah, really good stuff. So that was from 1981. They've got a number of albums, and like I said, I've got one of them, but it's their, I think, their '85 album. But so that's kind of when hair metal has already sort of started. But yeah, check out their 1981 album, which is known as Thunder and Rock if you get Maya Fist, or Fist known as Fleet Street. Yeah, but Thunder and Rock's a great song. But a lot again, same situation. A number of songs on the album are really good. Next one we'll talk about. This is an old one. This is from 1977, and I'm not necessarily a massive fan of this band, but their album from '77, and the band I'm talking about is Moxie, has a song on it called Rock Baby, and it's really a great hard rock song. Fits really well, I think, into what could potentially be a hair metal song or hair metal from a hair metal band. So yeah, check that one out, because that was like really surprised me when I heard that. I thought, wow, that's such a good song. So yeah, Moxie and Rock Baby. And then the other one I wanted to talk about is a band called Tease. Now this one's again in the 70s. This is 1979, and they've got a great, I mean, that's even a hair metal band name, isn't it? You can just imagine a hair metal band called Tease. So Tease with a Z, and from the album One Night Stands, they've got a song called Heartless World. Really great song. And yeah, so that's my pick there. So yeah, so like I said, all these songs are in the playlist that I have created, and you can see a link in the description for that. So just to finish off though, I just wanted, I guess, to make the point that it's interesting that there were all these Canadian bands that had songs that sounded like they could be from the hair metal days, but were prior to 1983. But then when hair metal actually does take off, a lot of these bands that I've shown you, had very little or any success, or even still even existing at the time. So what's it like, sort of like, yes, okay, even Loverboy, like, they were big prior to hair metal. When hair metal actually took off, yeah, not so much really, So in fact, I think they really only put out that Wild Side album in '87. It did go gold, but then they just sort of disappeared, and for at least for a while. And then, yeah, Lee Aaron had a bit of success, but a lot of those other bands, Aldo Nova really struggled. Triumph, they struggled. April Wine didn't work out really much for them either. Some of the bands were trying to have success, were releasing things, but yeah, they didn't have the success that some of the other newer bands that fit into that hair metal category had. But also there weren't even really that many Canadian. When you think about how many pre-hair metal bands there were that had that sound, there weren't really that many hair metal Canadian bands. At least there's a number. I mean, you got Helix, obviously, and they I guess you could say they were doing hair metal before hair metal, because they had their debut album came out before '83. But a lot of their material was, of course, then released. The albums I've got from them are all sort of in that sort of '83 onwards period. But I mean, Honeymoon Suite, they're more AOR, but yeah, they could fit into that category. Kickaxe, Killer Dwarfs, Brighton Rock, definitely hair metal band. Big House, Svengali, Haywire. One of their albums I've got that I think really fits that hair metal category really good. It's a good album. But yeah, so there's a few. There's more than that as well. But that's just some of them that come to mind. But yeah, but what I did want to just finish with, I've got a couple of compilations, and these came out around '84, '85 time, when I guess the hair metal scene is happening, and so some of these newer bands are coming through. But interestingly enough, very few of these bands really had any success. So this is called Moose Molten Metal. So it's the cover, pretty cool. It's a fun compilation, this one, and some good songs on here. But yeah, this is the back cover, and the only band, well, actually, it's got Fist. Fist is on here. So yeah, obviously I know them, and also the band Dagger, I know them. But other than that, all these other bands I'm not particularly familiar with. So they don't really go on to have much success. And the other compilation I wanted to show is one called Maple Metal. I think this probably came out a little bit after that. It might be 85, I'm not sure. 85, 86 anyway. But yeah, Maple Metal, and it's got some of the bands actually that were on the Moose Molten Metal. But yeah, none of these bands really go on to do anything particular. But what is interesting, I guess, is the band called Kid Wicked here. Vocalist is Sebastian Bach. And actually, it's a great song. Take a look at me. Really good song. But they didn't ever, I don't think, put out an album, which is a shame. But but yeah, Sebastian Bach on that one. So yeah, he had a lot of success, of course. But yeah, that's not pre-hair metal. This is, like I say, mid-80s. All right, so that's my show for today. I may actually do another show where I talk about hair metal before hair metal existed, because like I said, obviously there's other bands not from Canada who also were doing a similar sound, and so that could be another show in itself. But that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscriber button if you're not yet subscribing and you enjoy this type of content, and I'll catch you later. All right, see ya.